Nice to see everybody. Our goal, so a couple different kind of housekeeping and notes that I wanted to kick off. Obviously, first, happy holidays to everybody. Definitely that time of the year. We're experiencing it here in Cleveland in many cold ways. I'm excited for all of that to come. I do have just some general high level updates on kind of some initiatives for 2025 and some dates. We're going to get all of our kind of quarterly check-ins scheduled over the next couple of weeks, so they'll be on the calendar. We'll assign topics as things kind of evolve or go along, but my goal is to continue doing this on a quarterly basis. We are starting to really unpack what Digital Deep Dive is going to look like this year. It is April 2nd and 3rd in Chicago. So we're going to try a new location. If we don't like Chicago, we're going to either go back to Atlanta or check out another market. But I think the property that we're at, many of you have been to before, especially if you've been to Winning Ways or any other sort of Winding River program, or even LEA for that matter, in Chicago, Rosemont. It's a great property, great area, a lot of exciting things happening in that space. So we are moving it to Chicago this year. It'll be April 2nd and 3rd. We're working through some of the agenda and the overarching theme in terms of the direction we want to go in. So I'll be excited to announce that early January. I am working on right now a panel of 2 or 3 firms that are spending anywhere between $500,000 and $2 million a year on paid media. It's a big conversation I hear a lot about in terms of questions around today and what people are doing. So excited on that front. This is kind of a little bit of a starting point on generative search. It's something Joy and I have been talking quite a lot about, working with some firms on as well. And so wanted to take advantage of what to think about when it comes to generative search going forward for today's, but we know we'll dive deeper into that. And then the third piece that's top of mind is how are we managing technology and people at the same time? So much technology. Are we upskilling? Are we replacing? What do we need to be thinking about and how we're managing it going forward? So those are all things top of mind for me. If there is anything top of mind for you, we'll send an email out afterwards today, and always happy and thrilled to get ideas and topics from you. I'm reading 4 books right now to figure out which one we're going to look at focusing on. Right now, I am reading The Go-Giver. I don't know if anybody's read this one yet, quite yet. Chris, shaking his head. Great book. Excited to continue down that path. The next one is Mindset. And so we'll definitely keep that top of mind. So, Joy, I know you have a PowerPoint. I've got a slide up there with some of the DDD info. But, again, Joy and I were chatting earlier this week, really thinking about, and last week, what are important things to be focused on going into 2025. This is definitely a hot topic. I was with a firm Tuesday night at Digital CPA. They landed 2 clients through ChatGPT. I know, Stacy, we've talked about it. Other firms winning business through GBT or other sorts of AI bots, and thought it'd be a great conversation, and asked Joy to join us today to dive into it. And Joy, I want to turn it over to you.
It's a good time. It's a good time to be rethinking this, not just because in our kind of annual recalibration, right, that we're all kind of doing right now, rethinking how we're going to move forward into the new year, but because user behavior has shifted dramatically. So there's kind of like these big impacting forces, right? User behavior is shifting and Google has shifted, right? So ad trust, bam, right? You've got like monopolistic behavior, bam. Are they going to lose Chrome? Bam. Yeah, how wonderful. So Franco can weigh in on any of that Google stuff that I just talked about. And then you have kind of this shifting landscape in social too, right? You've got kind of these incumbents, maybe TikTok will be disenfranchised, things like that. So when we think of search engines, capital S, capital E, not just Google, the reality is people are becoming a lot more comfortable with the idea of using things that aren't even on Google. Anecdotally, so I met with a girl earlier this week. She's in PR and she's switching, whatever, I do like career coaching, and she's switching her job. And she goes, I don't even use Google anymore. She's like, I can't even imagine using Google. I use TikTok for everything. I was like, and she's like 23, like a tiny baby. Yeah, I know, Brandon, I'm gonna put him up in a second. But still, I was like, this is happening. So I thought, okay, well, that's good validation, right? That we're thinking in the right direction here, because this is definitely something that I feel like we're having endless conversations about with people. So I'm going to run through a couple of big picture stuff. If you've heard me present before, I just prefer to go fast. Oh, do you want to do this first, David?
Digital Deep Dive, April 2nd and 3rd. We'll see you in Chicago. Okay.
Everybody has
back
to come because I want to see you all in person and we can talk more. It's always more fun when we're together in real life. So we'll pull that back up again at the end, make sure you have all the deets. But SGO, so let's talk about this. So a generative engine, in case it's unclear or unfamiliar as a term, ChatGPT, Copilot, Perplexity, anything that generates information or content is called a generative engine, right? So we have search engines and we have generative engines. Those are two different things, right? A search engine's primary function is like Google, right? Pulling in information in response to an inquiry. A generative engine is about creating content. Now, what has happened is we have had this massive explosion of adoption with like ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude and all these huge large language model systems that have really nice UIs, user interfaces, right? They're easy to use, it's fast, all that kind of thing. So those systems, though they weren't originally created to collect and curate sourced results, have begun to do that. Not naturally, it has been built into the technology. So OpenAI launched ChatGPT search, right? So there's now these modules or these capabilities within these generative systems that are starting to increasingly encroach on what people would typically go to Google for. Let's level, right? Like, so yes, the 23-year-old PR girl's using TikTok to search, but the reality is this is proliferate. Like, there are hundreds of millions of people who are using these generative engines on a daily basis. And they're not just using them ad hoc on the internet, right? So there's integrations with apps, there's integrations with social media, there's integrations with project management tools. My ClickUp has an AI generation component, right? Like this is everywhere. And it's mostly, you can mostly trace it back to OpenAI, LLMs, and other systems like that. Okay, so just to be clear, like, yes, there's the actual behavior of going and sitting down and pulling up ChatGPT, but people are using ChatGPT in a lot more ways than that they don't even realize they're using it because of the way that it's so massively integrated into all of the tech stack that we're using on the regular basis.
It's just to accent at Digital CPA on Tuesday morning, their keynote was that Ali Miller, who came from AWS and Google runs AI, and she was the 8 a.m. and she had a chart on there, how many months to reach 100 million users.
Yeah.
And ChatGPT, 2 months. 2 months. TikTok, I think, was 9 months. Uber, 70 months. So just to put some things in perspective, how fast.
Threads, I think adoption wise was the only platform that's done it faster, but that's just because people were like, ooh, bright, shiny. And Instagram did a good job marketing it. But yes, absolutely. David's absolutely right. The adoption has been ridiculous, right? It's been like pouring gasoline on fire. So Search GPT is inside Chat GPT. So I talked about this before, right? So before we had these two very clean cut categories, like, okay, so I'm going to find out how many, what temperature this roast needs to be before I can take it out of the oven. We're going to go to Google, right? And then, oh, but I'm going to write an email to a colleague. I'm going to go to Chat GPT, right? Those behaviors are changing because the fundamental function of those two categories of engines are starting to overlap, right? Or intertwine, maybe let's say. So Search GPT is inside ChatGPT. It has come out. There's a Chrome plugin so that you can actually make it your default search engine, right? I mean, it's wild. Like this is really, really happening. Google has experience. Okay, well, let's not talk about Google for that. But Google has had quite a ridiculous and lengthy journey towards AI, Gemini, and it's been kind of a mess for them. But as you know, they also have a lot of other things going on. And one of the big, like I said at the very beginning, one of the big things in this major antitrust lawsuit with the SEC is that they might lose Chrome, right? That's one of the ways that they're thinking about splitting up the company, which would be obviously devastating, but would also advance perhaps some of this, right? So it's an important thing to know. ChatGPT is more popular than Google for local area queries right now, meaning for accounting firms like ours, right? When people are searching for things and there's a local component to it, it is pretty important that we start to show up in these generative engines. So want to really quick address this because we are building AI agents at Winding River for clients, and we've had clients come back to us and be like, I don't want to do that, right? I don't want my content to not sound human. I don't want to write for bots. I don't want to optimize in that way. It feels artificial. It feels whatever. And then there's also the very logical question that you guys as growth leaders should have, which is this going to hijack my website? Right? So if I'm just answering people's questions in ChatGPT, right, and I'm formatting content in a way that makes sense, then does that mean that they're never going to click through to my website? And if they do, can I even measure it? right? Like attribution modeling. Like, how do I know that marketing was the first touch for that attributed revenue source? Things like that. So those are the right questions to be asking if that came to mind. But the reality is there's kind of two. These weren't both supposed to be one. Sorry about that. It should be 1 and 2. But number one, kind of no, right? So the basic things I'm going to walk through in a second, which is what I want you to kind of take away from today, is that functionally there are some things that you can do to your content that is going to increase the likelihood that it will rank in generative engines. Like I'm going to run through that. And I'm not going to go through all the slides, but I put all the information together so that you can get it after this and give it to your team and look it over and see like, hey, could we implement any of these editing components into our content? But first of all, Google is fine with AI content. It has no problem. It's not going to hurt your, it's not going to hurt your rankings. It's not going to, you're not going to be penalized in any kind of way. And if you're seeing a lot of posts around the helpful content update and things like tanking websites, those are spammy websites to begin with, right? So these aren't things that are like high quality. Now, Franco may have clarifying information on that because it's obviously, I'm hyper simplifying it. But as long as your content is still authoritative and trustworthy, optimizing it in this way so that AI agents pick it up and deliver it to a user as a search result, that is not going to be a problem for you for the most part. It will be a problem for you if you don't do it right. Okay. So this is actually a really, really important point. We don't necessarily want to be like, okay, Google appears to be faltering. Google is still a behemoth. Google was, accused of monopolistic behavior for a reason, right? Everybody uses it. It's hugely impactful. It's a lifeblood of our homes and our home devices and our phones and our everything. Like if it falters, it's not like it's going to go away. And so it is important that you still, and your website is an appreciable asset, right? So it is important that you are still being thoughtful about driving traffic to your website. So there's a risk of perhaps some SEO agencies coming into you and being like, okay, now here's the formula for content. We don't care about long articles anymore about tax law. We just want to give 6 bullet points on the basics, summarizing what's happened in the world, because that's what's going to rank in ChatGPT, right? You can't just do that. If you just do that, you really risk taking all of the eggs out of your website basket and sticking them in the generative engine basket. And the reality is these systems aren't for sure anyway, right? So if you've read anything about Google, or read anything, sorry, about model collapse or model drift in AI, LLMs, this is happening. This is a big deal. Like there's a reason they keep having to iterate new versions. ChatGPT isn't putting out new versions because they want to make things better. They're putting out new versions because the model drifts, right? And it starts to damage and it starts to get full of bias and it starts to pull in inaccurate sources and things like that, right? And the more AI content that just exists in the world, the more you're feeding the chicken, right? And that's a huge risk for model drift or collapse. So becoming completely reliant, I mean, I tell marketing departments this all the time, like don't rely on ChatGPT or Claude or anything exclusively for your content, because if you do, the day it doesn't work, like you're 6 months out from nobody remembering how to do it for real, like with a piece of paper. Like it's so easy to lose those basic skills. And you simply can't because we don't know. So the point is the LLMs are not completely certain. Google is not completely certain. This is a both and thing, not an either or thing.
Joy, if I can add one thing about Gemini, it's actually creating it when it cites sources. Sometimes those sources are made up by the AI. So be very, very careful with Gemini specifically.
It hallucinates wildly, and it'll give you case studies that sound extremely good, like complete fabrications. So yeah, it's certainly not something that you want to approach without caution when you're generating content, and it's certainly not something that people should approach without caution when they're consuming content. And I think that's another good point, Franco, for the both and approach to SEO and SGO. Because if you're to say, I'm just going to deliver all my content on these generative engines, you're going to have people like us who have a healthy skepticism about what they see there, right? So if you show up there, they're going to want to click through to your website and see more, right? Like, okay, prove it. You said these things are true. I need to see that that is true, because there's going to be a user behavior trend towards validating and verifying. Hopefully, hopefully we don't just move into like blind trust. All All right, so I'm going to give a very basic overview, like I said, of content guidelines. And then I'm interested kind of to hear from you all about if you've started doing some of this, have you thought about it? I know that some of you have ranked in generative engines. I'm interested to know if you've traced back like what kind of content has been effective there. But there are basically these like ways to frame content. It's not going to be really additive as much as it's going to be an amendation of what you currently do, right? Meaning you're not going to add a whole bunch of new sections basically to content. It's really like good content is good content is good content. The big picture is that you need to lead with answers a little bit faster, which really good writers don't like to do because you want to hook them, like you want to hook the reader in with something that feels a little tantalizing and a little mysterious so that you get dwell time on the page. But if you think about it, all of the metrics that we've associated with great content like dwell time aren't really the same metrics here, right? So on your website, it's very important that you get scroll depth, you get people going through a page, you get people clicking on buttons. Those kind of metrics aren't available on these platforms. It's really just about that lightning fast visibility and then hopefully the click through. Which, you know, most of the systems, Perplexity, right? Copilot's pretty good about it. Perplexity just released a where did this come from feature. So, I mean, they're getting there, right? So that you will get that click through rate. But the traceability of the data still remains a little wonky. So that's kind of an important point. But it's really a matter of starting to answer the question immediately. So within the first few lines of text, so if you have what's going on with this, you know, new tax law, right? Or what's going on with Trump tariffs, we're all writing about that kind of stuff, right? You need to answer it in the first sentence, right? Like this is exactly what's going on. And da, 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 da. And then give a long, beefy, good, in-depth article that if somebody clicked through, it would tell them a lot more. But it's really starting to kind of change the way that your writers are putting content together so that it pulls that out. Which honestly, this is something, I mean, right, Franco, like with featured snippet goals, like we've already been doing this, like key takeaways and stuff.
Yeah, organic's been like you said, if you put the answer more prevalent on the page or above the fold, that can help AI a little bit. But Google's organically already been doing that. If you had a paragraph a third of the way down the page, it's already making that answer the SERP result on Google, so that you'd have the same entry. So I think they'll get there as well, regardless of where you are. But you're right. Right now, the above the fold seems to be a little bit more more optimized, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. And it's grabby and it's conversational. And then I would think the other thing that you need to be really thoughtful about is if people are bringing skepticism into a generative engine experience, that your content, especially if you're generating it with AI, doesn't sound like AI. Because if it does, then they're going to be suspicious that it was a hallucinate or that it's something that was just made up. All right, I'm going to pause there for a second because I do want to have a conversation. The rest of this presentation is all full of things that you can use thoughtfully as you think about your own practices in content. Like you can rip it off, you know me, like just take it all, copy it, paste it, use it, like tell your team that kind of thing, and think through like if you've got options for the way that you're delivering content to people. So yeah, this is just good tips for, you know, ranking a little bit better and then sticking to SEO content best practices, right? Just making sure that you're doing the good things that you already know how to do. All right, so you'll get that full list and that'll give you like a lot more of the practicalities, but let's just pause here for a second and kind of talk about, are we trying to do this? Have we put have we put protocol in place? Have we thought through generative engines? Does this feel like another thing? Just curious what the general vibe is.
Hey Joy, it's Allison. My general vibe is yes, this is yet another thing, although one we're prepared for, but we haven't really dug too deep into our rankings within the generative space. So I wanted to ask, where can you find that? Is that within SEMrush? Is that like what are the best tools to track this?
Go, Franco.
All right. Analytics. So it's a little bit buried, and everybody, you know, went through the headache of going through GA3 to GA4 because of the lawsuit they went through, et cetera. If you go to your pages and screen title report, you can segment. It's very hard to talk about it without showing it, but they're above the name of the article, there's a very small box that you can drop down and add the source medium report. It used to be a menu item on the dashboard, and then open it up to like 250 entries because you only get 10. In there, you'll see chat.openai, for example. You'll see the referrer source as AI. And we're seeing this across the board with a lot of companies. Exactly what Joyce said originally, where you would have the majority of your traffic in, coming from Google. We're starting to see at the bottom 10%, 15% is now generative engines. It'll say Perplexity. It'll say, so whatever version of OpenAI is there, or Claude, et cetera. So you do have the referral sources in there as long as they were first entry point.
Okay, so the referral source that we can see within GA is kind of our best way of gauging whether or not we are ranking on the generative engines.
Correct. Right. But it's specifically source medium. Referrals can be other websites also, but you have to drop down the source medium. And there's like 10 different listings because it has referral source and then medium, and then it has like medium. So just the one that's the old one that says source medium. Yeah.
Since this is quite useful, I think, for people, do you want to walk me through it? Oh, wait, hold on, I gotta go to a different property.
You have to have a different property. I got to remember exactly where it was.
That's okay.
All right.
Let's find a client site that's set up. All right, where am I going?
All right. So if you go to report snap or overview, yeah.
Pages, you said?
Yeah, go to page, scroll down a little bit. The card that's at the bottom left, which pages and screen get the most views? Right, go down one, that one.
Sorry, I'm gonna delete a little.
That's all right. And then see where it says page, the page title and screen class. Yep. Okay, next to that, there's right there. And then type source in the search box. And then you want one that says source medium.
Source medium right here. Wait.
First user.
First user, probably. No.
Let's try that. Yeah, there you go. Now open it up to, see how the screen has rows per page in the middle? Open that up to like whatever, 100, 250.
First, this client has a pretty low site.
Okay, and then scroll down a little bit more and you should, yeah.
Ooh, I didn't know you could see that.
There it is, chat,
yep,
see
row
row 67. Yeah, ChatGPT.
Oh,
so cool. Yep. Okay, that was worth looking through. Thank you.
This recording is coming, so I don't have to quickly screenshot it, right? Okay.
We have to recreate that like 5 times before.
You have to hunt and peck every time, right?
Yeah, before we're going to remember it. Okay, who said that's a big no? Jennifer? That's a big no, like you don't want to do it, or that's a big no, like you're not thinking about it?
Not really thinking about it, if I can be honest. Too many things to do during the day. Certainly we use these tools, but we have not kind of made that leap to start thinking about our content and how it's ranking, on these platforms. So that's something that we need to focus on in the coming year.
Yeah. And I mean, like I had said, there's SEO best practices will win.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be useful for generative engines, but the deck that we'll get after this, if you have someone who oversees content at your firm, or even just, marketing court, anybody who does kind of the last check of content that goes on the website, if you can just add some of those editing parameters in, it's going to help you tweak, right? So these are really tweaks. These are calibrations. They're not like, okay, now we have to do whole new types of content.
That makes me feel better. Thank you, Joy.
Yeah. It's not like a whole new category of content that you have to start creating, because that would
be the thought of that kind of makes my head want to explode. But when you put it like that, it does make me feel better.
Yeah.
The baseline infrastructure is really important too. And all I mean by that is what you would have done for Google to begin with, your robots text file, your sitemaps, all of those apply to AI. So as long as that structure is in place and normalized, all of the SGOs will be able to pick up your website and crawl it just like they do. And by the way, everybody ignores your robots text file. Google is looking at even your no indexed, your no follows. They're reading the entire website. All of them are. So anyway, if your infrastructure is in good shape, then you should be fine moving forward. Then it's just a matter of focusing on the content and value to the user.
So thinking strategically, 2025 big picture, we know content's critical. We know that, we need to have the right format for how we're creating content in terms of, addressing people's problems. You go to GPT, you start playing around, find me a a CPA near me that specializes in construction, for heavy highway, right? And start playing around with some of those search terms in there, and then thinking about how that impacts your website. At the same time, making sure the rest of your website really clearly describes what you do, how you do it, who your professionals are. All of those things, have been important, but how are sites being kind of digested, now when it comes to how they're pulling that into the results and bots, I guess is my question, right? So are we feeding the bots content, or are we feeding the site content, or both?
I would argue, and Joy, I'll take the first part and you take the second part, but I would argue that as long as your page structure is good, if you're adding value to the end user, if I need to know about BOI filing and you answered my question, that wins, regardless of how good or not good your structure. If the answer is correct,
Sure.
that's how it wins, and it'll get absorbed by all of the platforms. Secondary to that, to help boost it, would be adding correct page structure because of things like screen readers, right? Accessibility features, H tags, one H1 per page, appropriate title, H2, and then the sequencing. That's really important too, but you don't want to lead with part two. You want to lead with the answer and the value.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, just reiterating kind of what I said before, like it's a both and, not an either or. And frankly, you need every 6 months or so to kind of rethink how you're putting content out there anyway, right? To refresh it, make sure it's good and interesting and funny and whatever you want it to be to keep users around. So I think that that's important. And I think too, I feel like even in the past 5 years, because of the increase in adoption in AI, especially in marketing, like the challenge is really, the gauntlet's been thrown down for us to become more creative. Just has, right? Like it's the table stakes of being able to create good content are no longer a differentiator for any of us. Like it's so easy. It's been so thoroughly democratized because of these systems. And so I think, you know, the real next gen thinkers who are pushing these fields forward, right? Social media and SEO and all these different email marketing, all of that are being creative. They're thinking outside the box. They're getting a little weird. They're getting really strong in brand voice,
I
like
think
doing
that's such a
something
key point.
different.
Just the fact that content is now not a commodity, but everybody has access to it, right? Same consultants, we all have access to the same people. It's how that creativity comes to life, maybe a little bit differently. In a lot of cases, I'm just curious, going down that same path, a lot of times we're thinking about content driving inbound. It's create pillar pages, create blog articles, right? Using other tools. Are there things that are top of mind when we should be going back every 3 to 6 months and looking at our web pages for service offerings, and trying to update those, go deeper every 3 months, really prioritizing not just new content in terms of thought leadership and blog content, but also our web pages? Because I think that gets forget about sometimes.
I think that the idea of managing a large amount of content, and we'll get into this next when we talk about AI agents and basically building your own. But what this is going to, so there's a mistaken understanding, right? There's a misunderstanding that creating more content is just going to be better. But if you have more of anything, right? If your kid starts some kind of random collection, you have to start managing all of those random Pokemon that come home, right? The more stuff you have, the more you have to take care of. And that principle is very, very real in content because content ages. And so there's this temptation, I think, and we've dealt with this with a lot of clients, especially with very large sites. So let's say we have a client that's getting like, 250,000 hits a month, right? They want to create 20 blogs a week. Cool. That number snowballs quickly because you have to manage all of that content then, right? You have to be on top of when it ages out. You have to be on top of when links break. You have to be there. So more is not necessarily better. More can be strategic, but I also think AI has put people at risk for practicing gray hat SEO that never would have done it before because they think, oh, well, like this is like a cheat code, but it's not a cheat code. You still have to create content that is good for humans to read. And this isn't a race to see who can create more content, right? That's not going to win in the end. Like Franco said, if you're not actually answering questions that humans have. So I think it's important for all of us to remember, especially if we feel intimidated by the idea of like going for broke with content production, that is not the way. That's the way to madness, right? That's not the way to success. We need to be thoughtful still and really conscientious about how we're, creating content, going to market, getting in front of the right people. And that creativity will be a big deal.
Yeah, but Joey, better is better. I think to your point is you already have good content on your website. It's probably thin content. Maybe it's 400 words, 500 words, where it should be as appropriately large to get the reader to get a satisfying and full answer to what you already have. Because there's also, the crawlers, there's a crawl budget, right? They're not going to spend, if you have 10,000 pages, they're going to leave and come back because they don't have enough processing cycles to go search, a trillion web pages. Skyscraper technique, right? Brian Dean's 11 pages, 3 million views, but best of the best caliber content. So the work effort put into the individual content matters a lot.
A question about video and how that plays in. Because you mentioned TikTok. I am not on TikTok. I don't think a lot of decision makers are like primarily using that yet, but YouTube is huge. And so for like these techniques, and I think a lot of what we've been talking about has been written content, but can you talk a little bit about how video plays in?
Yeah, video plays in hugely. People underestimate. I mean, TikTok is one of the biggest search engines in the world. YouTube is one of the biggest search engines in the world. And one of the things that you'll see on one of my slides is multimodal and talking about adapting content types. So Perplexity has just introduced when they do, so you get generative engine results from them, there are both ads and multimedia options for results. That's going to happen. Right. So just like Google with the search engine results page, you can do the tabs of like, this is your written, this is your image, this is your video, whatever. It's going to happen in all of them. So performance in all kinds of media is worth doing, and all types of media can be optimized for search. So YouTube and a lot of it's spoken word. So we did a whole virality campaign on TikTok for this last year, my team, and like it was, soul sucking, but we did it, right? And basically, how do you go viral, right? Crack the code. And we did it, right? We figured it out. Because it's a rule book and everything is based on it. But like the first 3 to 6 spoken words make all the difference in a TikTok video. Because everything that you're saying is text, right? It can be turned into text. It is language. And so language can be used by search engines. So people think the caption is the big deal. And like in like a YouTube, we have all these like formulas for YouTube captions where everybody's like has all these like mastermind classes of how you do your YouTube captions. Yes, and what's on the video itself is useful, right? So if you have a really long, 5-second bumper on the beginning of a video, you're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot, right? Because those first 3 to 5 spoken words tell a lot to the search engine, and that's going to be the hook that makes the difference, right? And if that spoken word matches the title, just like we do in SEO, right? The page title matches the H1, matches the, meta description. If all that data that's inherent to a video can be aligned, it's going to increase your chances of yielding search results. Yeah, Allison. It's true, right? Nobody's going to wait 4 seconds for your cute floating logo. And you're like, I kind of miss them personally, but nobody's waiting. And then like the millennial pause, I got called out on that hardcore this year. They're like, stop. Because like I start a video and I'm just like, and then I start talking. You'll get crucified. Anyway. All right. Well, we're all learning lots of new things. Any other questions so far? And then what I wanted to show you was a project that we have started doing with building custom AI agents, because again, I want to talk about kind of that better is better thing that Franco referenced. But any other questions or thoughts so far? I don't want to not let this be collaborative. Do we feel like on a scale of 1 to 10, are we like over it? Like so sick of hearing about AI? Or we're just like, we got to do it.
Just the beginning. AI agents is interesting. That was the big conversation. I think 2025 is what they say, the year of AI agents, which is a great, kind of putting the tools to work versus just being generative content, and being workflow oriented. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's no doubt that I could see where that's going to come to life a little bit more in 2025 versus, hey, AI is everywhere. We got to figure out how to start using it, right?
Definitely. Let me double check the chat and make sure we've done away with openings. I'm thinking about it now. Anne-Marie, you're thinking about it because you're here and I'm talking.
Just gonna say, like, we'd like to be over AI, but yeah, it's just starting.
It's important to have hobbies that aren't.
I was laughing. What is the pause at my age before the video actually starts? People would be able to get a cup of coffee.
They're like the millennial pause. I'm like, I'm barely a millennial. Okay.
That's also important. I mean, what LinkedIn's launching their short video tool, I think, in 2025. And so there'll be a little button at the bottom for short videos, and they're going to take the TikTok approach. So
yeah,
equally as important.
We do these executive. Oh, you do, Allison? That's cool. We
Do
do
you think
these
there's
executive trainings, and it's funny because they're. Oh, you have it on your app. That's interesting.
do you think there's going to be fatigue from how these videos are produced these days? I know I have significant fatigue. I'm not even watching them anymore. I can't handle it.
There's something in
So
advertising called banner blindness. You see something so much that you just, you ignore it.
yeah,
That
the
will
floating
happen.
head pointing at something, the text blocks, the fast-paced dialogue, like I'm very reluctant to do that in a professional manner, for an accounting firm, because it's just, I don't know, it seems so styled for a very specific audience. And I don't know if the rest of us old people, Jennifer, I don't know if it's just us or if it's kids these days. Old man yells at cloud. I don't know what it is, but
It's us Gen X people. We're just done with all that
I
stuff.
don't even know who is I don't even know which one the Gen X
The
is.
forgotten generation, right? 65 through, what was it,
I need a
87
chart.
or something?
Bruce, you're Gen X, okay?
If it's through 80s, okay, I am too.
87 or 80.
Yeah, no, I think your point's well taken, and that is part of. So I think there's two things there. So I think yes, absolutely trend fatigue. Okay, like people get sick of it, they get blind to it, and that's where I'm saying like be more creative, right? We have to think more creatively. The video dimensions, the video style, like at this point, you're right, it's copycat. Who wants to see a copycat? Right. So I think we need to be thinking differently about the way that we're putting some of these assets together. Video is a great medium, right? There are wonderful movies, but like, short form may be the thing, but is it what everybody has an appetite for? Is it what people in your audience have an appetite for?
How are
I
you
mean,
using short form? I think it can be used in a lot of different ways. I got 10 different emails the last 3 months about BOI. We don't do it, but we want you to know about the rules. We do it. How can we help you? Right. And it's all the same messaging. So where do I create creatively, right? Can differentiate ourselves. And in a lot of cases, video is that format to do so. But again, if it's a talking head, then it's not going to be the same as something you might see on a TikTok style type of video, which is what people are getting more used to when they're consuming content.
Joy, do you think there's an appropriate type of content by category? So hats, if you remember the old analogy, like a train conductor hat, ship captain, whatever. Is there something along those lines for video for industry, like the accounting industry should be this more formal, trusted hat or something along those lines?
I think it depends. You look at somebody like Chase Berkey and he's like punking it up, right? So I think authenticity is the name of the game, right? So like I'm launching, so we do like this executive branding stuff right now, and I'm doing it with some guy in the supply chain, and we're launching a whole like a Monday rant, calling it his Bill's Monday rant, and he's going to be the grumpy old man who's ranting about stuff because that's him, like, and he's into it, and we're gonna like lean into it, right, and just make him like the weird grumpy old guy. So that's a little negative, but he's into it. So I think it's the idea of like figuring out like what's real about.
I think you make a good point because you're dealing with a person, right? Bruce is talking about the firm going to do this, and we need to figure out what professionals within our firm are going to be that brand or voice that can create that relationship digitally as well, maybe face to face. And so in many cases, when we think about that content or that video, we're doing it for the firm. We're not doing it for the individual, right? People buy from people. And I think that's the other, area right now that a lot of firms are talking about. How do we identify what professionals are going to be good and want to take the time to develop that brand, from a LinkedIn perspective with short content to drive that awareness, to get engagement and driving back to the website. And how do you get people to raise their hand and say, hey, I want to be that person as part of it? Now it's our job at marketing and growth to support them to execute it, through the tools of the firm itself. But it's not always the firm that's able to be successful. And I think that's part of the creative challenge we have going forward, to win that share of voice.
So we kind of the hat analogy. I mean, we are on different platforms with different areas that we work in, and our content is reflective. We're pretty heavily into the NIL space. So where we are with that and what our videos and how they look are much different than maybe what we look like on Facebook, and how we look different on TikTok or X for some of the different niches we're in. So we kind of have taken that approach. Because I don't think it is a one size fits all with the different types of clients that we work with.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And the days of like taking one piece of content and putting it on all your platforms, like then just don't do it. It's just not even worth doing. Because they are so specific. So, I think Bruce, to your point, like honor your preferences, right? If you say like this is boring or this is basic or this is dumb, like then don't do it, because it's, you won't have the right, it won't come off right, I think. And so it's like, okay, find something else. Maybe it's some other version of something. Maybe it's documentary style. Maybe, people find one thing on social media and they do it all the time. And that's all they do. And that's how you win on social, right? You find a thing and you just do it. There's a girl on TikTok who just dances for her cat, and it's cat concerts. And the video is set up behind her cat and she just dances. This is, but, and I'm not saying it needs to be something absurd, but find a thing, right? And just kind of stick to it and experiment a little bit. The second thing I did want to really quickly mention is like, I am very committed to the idea of the 7-year itch. And we are 3 years out from 7 years of COVID, right? Of post-COVID. And so I think if you think about it, 2020 was like game changing, right? We all started working from home. We're all on these little boxes, that kind of thing. It's very likely that culturally in the next 3 years, we're going to get to a point of really wanting to return to in-person, analog, paper. I mean, culture goes in cycles. It would be foolish of us to look at this digital thing and be like, this is all it will be forever. Like, no, people's appetites change. And the smartest thing we as growth and marketing professionals can do is say, how am I going to win right now? And what are the dominoes I'm setting up, right? To potentially be impactful when the appetite change, when the demand shifts, when people are thinking and wanting different things. So look at what's nascent, look at what's rumbling, and think about preparing for that as well.
Want to talk a little about AI agents?
Yeah, sorry. But I feel bad because Bruce doesn't like video. All right, so wanted to quickly show you this. So Stacy will recognize this, but one of the things that we are starting to do is be really thoughtful about how AI can create good content. So we talked a lot about at the top of the call about, okay, we're gonna create content that's calibrated for generative engines, cool beans, right? I think we all agree that's a good idea. We can see the data, all of that. And if the content we create is, that's kind of the output, right? That's the channel, that's the delivery mechanism. I want to talk a little bit about the content itself. So the content itself is something that we all kind of have to think about. One of the things I did say that is true, but I'm going to kind of go against it, is that everybody's creating more content, and you don't have to just create more content to win. That said, you do have to make some strategic decisions about the content that you're creating and if you are going to be competitive. And if you're not, if you're doing too little, then you aren't going to win, right? So let's say like the search volume for a specific like tax accountant quadruples, right? If that happens and you're ranking number 10, number 15 for the phrase tax accountant, you have to create more content or you have to beef up that content, right? So just because the nature, we don't want to just go after the easy win or the low-hanging fruit. The reality is we do have to create content. Content is the lifeblood of marketing, and we need to create good content, and AI is a good way to do it. That said, there are endless reasons that I would tell you not to just use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, right? So the next step, if that's what you're doing, right? If you've implemented good processes, you're getting stuff that's good enough, you are totally susceptible, and I already said this, but I'll say it again, you're totally susceptible to the whims of the platform then, right? You don't own any of that content. The model can drift. It could go out. You could lose credits. They could raise the price to a place that's so prohibitive that you're like, how in the world, right? There are endless reasons that dependence on some of those free LLMs or even paid LLMs, any public LLM that you could get, large language model, is risky, right? It's risky to have that be your long-term plan. And you probably should have a long-term plan. The best long-term plan is building like an AI agent. All right. So essentially what an AI agent is there's these wrappers. And I think last month that they talked to
Last quarter.
what's his
Yeah,
face?
Aaron.
Aaron. Yeah. So sorry, last month you talked to Aaron about, and he kind of showed you Cassidy AI, which is like a wrapper for AI agents. There are plenty, right? So Smith OS is the one that we're currently using on a certain project, and actually for James Moore, which is going really well, and we're super excited about it. But essentially what we're doing is there's no public facing component to it. It's completely canopied. It only has the data that we train it on, right? So it can't shift, right? Because I mean, you use ChatGPT after like 4 or 5 times, you're like, wait, come back, like, because it goes off into these weird tangents and things. That's model shift. So that can't happen. It insulates you against that. All the content that is being created within the AI agent is owned, right? Because it's our content, right? We're creating it. There's no, it can pull in external sources, but it won't, it's completely generated on our behalf and using content that we've trained it on. The calibration components are vastly superior. So I'm just going to show you a little bit, and I'm not going to give away the farm here, Stace, don't worry. But I'm just going to show you the big picture, not the branded stuff, but like essentially how we're training it so that you can understand like what it would take. And none of this is all stuff that you could Google. So obviously I won't give you anything specific, but what you essentially do is you create ADL codes is what they're called, but it's basically just training prompts for all of the elements of the content creation process. So like if you were to sit down and say, okay, I know exactly how we create SEO blogs, right? We do keyword research, we do outlining, we do whatever, and then the SEO content has to have these attributes. It has to have these many words, it has to have 2 internal links and 2 external links, whatever, right? Thought leadership pieces, social media content, all the different content types that you have. And you basically create rules around what that content is, right? So how that content looks, everything that it must have in it. So you set all the standards for that. And then you go in and you insert all of those, right? So all these many rules that go into it. Feedback cycles, revision cycles, things like that. And it gets to the point where I can essentially pull up then my chatbot. It will communicate to me, and I can partner with it to create content that's exclusively sourced the way I want it to be sourced, and the output is completely set the way I want it to be set. It's pretty cool. It's a lot of work, but it is cool. And one of the things that I think I've discovered when I've been putting this together, so I've done 3 of these now, is that it helps you map stuff that you didn't realize you needed to map. Right? Like how content's getting created, how are we categorizing content, what is our taxonomical structure, what tags are we using on stuff, how are we classifying different types of content, and being able to think all that through in the informational design phase, like kind of sets you up for success regardless of whether or not you build your own AI agent. Right? Because you're like, okay, these are all the fields that I actually need to be thinking about, right? And even reporting, right? We're thinking about first touch attribution or something like that. You're thinking about what is the purpose of all of these kinds of content, then what attributes does it have to have? And then you can add in the additional dimensions, for instance, of audience. So like Stacy's team has done like a fantastic job. I mean, Stacy is the OG, so she's fantastic at all of this, but like her team's done a really good job of putting together audience types that are specific to industry or service line. So we have an AI agent that we can deploy that knows every thought leader in her firm, that knows every industry, that knows the audience for that industry, and that's fully familiar like a tax expert, an assurance expert, an audit expert. And so we're building agents that are experts in each of those service lines, and then that have extensive brand and content training for James Moore, so that when we go create a blog, its output mirrors exactly what we want it to. It's legit. Any questions?
When you talk to, go ahead, sorry. Go ahead, Jerry.
Thanks, Dave. So, Joy, that's fascinating, and we haven't used AI agents, but we've adopted some of what you're already doing with what we're doing on the digital front too. But how does that compare to, say, Claude, where we're taking webinar content, transcribing, and then feeding it into Claude, and then producing that multimodal that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, so what I like about building your own agent, so first of all, you're not feeding into a system that stores your data, right? So like this system doesn't store this data on a private or on a public cloud anywhere. So it's never going to be, released that way. But secondly, I can set all these rules. So I can say like, okay, this was a webinar that was led by this individual in this practice line. And it would pull all the historical information and say, okay, historically, we've had this lead magnet and this CTA, and then you have these 3 social media platforms. And so then it would be able to pull in all that historical information to say like, okay, what do you want me to create? You want me to create a white paper from this? You want me to create a blog? You want me to create social media posts? But it doesn't have to think. It doesn't have to do any of the research on the fly. It's built with all of the, like, so here's the James Moore bucket of everything that you could ever ask. And then it's able to pull that. So it's much better resourced, and the output is much, much more calibrated.
It's going beyond just taking a transcript and writing something about it, right? So that's very generative in nature. It's taking a piece of content, writing it in a form that you're asking it to do so. And so it's much more of like generative, right? When you get into agents, it's workflow oriented. So what Joy was showing to you was all the different steps it takes to produce one piece of content of 1,000 words for their manufacturing industry around a tax topic today that's very important and relevant to the audience that we're trying to target. And so by building these workflows, you're injecting all different types of information and prompts you're trying to train it around to say, this is what we want you to produce, and this is why, and this is how it needs to be. You might pull in hot content, helpful standards. You might be pulling in other competitors. You're pulling in, training them on SMEs and what their backgrounds are. And so you're really starting to create a workflow that has a tone and voice, that has best practices for SEO. You have, different ways of creating those workflows. And the cool thing about a Smith OS or a wrapper like Cassidy or Smith is that you can use any LLM in there. You can use O4, you can use GPT, you can use Claude, you can use Perplexity. That's not the point of that system. The system is saying, hey, we're going to let you build your workflows and agents in one environment that you own that's protected to some degree, and then pull in the LLM to help you produce the outcome you're trying to desire. And so all of a sudden you have a knowledge base for all of these different verticals or industries that you can use in multiple facets. But the way that content is created, those workflows, is the big difference between what you would use a Claude for and what you would use something like this for.
And so, follow up just quickly, what's the time commitment to create that? Joy, you said that obviously it's very difficult in there, but it would seem to me that you're gonna spend lots of time building these out for each of those verticals.
We're estimating about 100 hours for the whole project, I think,
Thank
of
you.
our time, and then probably about 100 hours of Stacy's team's time. So it's not chill.
Yeah.
But once you have it, right? And you can change it. And then what we're doing right now this week is mapping all the entire structure so that we can pull it out of the wrapper and have it to put, like, let's say this wrapper goes away tomorrow, right? Like something catastrophic happens to their company. We've got all this. And so we have the build, right? So we own this thing that maps the entire ecosystem. And so then it can be deployed anywhere. And that's the cool thing too. So like when you build an AI agent, you can deploy it. So for instance, one of our goals long-term, with this agent that we're building right now is like, so we're building agents for every single service line that are trained in every industry. So all we have to do is pull it out, that specific agent that's totally trained on that, and we can go plop it into the website. And it can be a pop-up chatbot on the construction page. You go to the construction page, you got the construction chatbot. They're trained on everything that James Moore has ever written about construction, right? And all the latest laws and rules and things like that. So, there's kind of that external use, and then internally, right? So we're kind of, we talked about this, and we will be talking about this, I think, a little bit at Digital Deep Dive, but like the idea of the interplay of technology and human resources, like who we're hiring. So if you think about it, the skill needed this is real much more of a technologist role, right? The skill needed to interact with this chatbot. Now we're training it to identify name, to hold history conversation, to be able to reference, and things like that. But the first thing it asks is, hey, what's your name? Right? And it's like, okay, I'm Joy. All right, Joy, I'm your content partner. What are we going to create today? Right. And so it creates this kind of accessibility for somebody who's perhaps not a professional content creator to still be able to go learn this system and then use it, right? And if you think about it, then you wouldn't have to have a full-time writer. You could have somebody who's part-time doing, half their time is doing content creation, half their time is doing something much more technical, which could potentially support some of your other goals.
Joy, I just have a question, and I remember you from the digital deep dive, so thank you. This is so valuable. In terms of this conversation, just to give it some context, you are doing this project with Stacy as a consulting engagement, right? So if we wanted something similar, we would contact you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
I mean, I don't know. Ask Stacy.
Well, Stacy will, I'm sure, give you a resounding referral.
Yes, absolutely.
And when do you
So far, so
anticipate,
good.
when do you anticipate finishing? Well, where you'll sort of have a runway for sharing experience.
By the end of this week, we'll have our first
Wow.
batch of content.
Wow.
But we're looking towards like Q1 of next year. So probably by the end of Q1, we'll be totally done testing.
Got it.
We're really taking our time because we want to make sure we're building something that really, really, really lasts. And so and it's complex.
And in one line, the it is an AI agent for various strategic focus areas of the firm and the practices, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Thank you.
Being sensitive of everybody's time. I know we've got a couple minutes, about 2 minutes left. I appreciate it. Like I said, great topic, a lot to cover here, a lot of new things happening. We try to be very data driven in terms of everything that we've done and seeing the results that go along with it. I know this will be a topic that we'll dive deeper into in Chicago, April 2nd and 3rd. In the meantime, we'll schedule a Q1 webinar here with all of ours going into 2025. I want to wish everybody a very happy holiday. We'll make sure after this, we will send out an email with the recording, the link to the presentation. Joy, thank you. Franco, I know you're not here, but thank you. Nice seeing everybody, and look forward to talking soon. If you have any questions, let us know.
These are just hugely valuable calls to us, so we appreciate you hosting them.
Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate it. Good seeing you. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Back
guys.
after.
Talk soon.
Bye.